I had a hard time deciding how to get this all set up. Originally, my thought was to do just a newer version of the Vulture review, but now I just wanted to kind of talk about Salvage as a whole in 323 and take a look at the difference in income for RMC versus construction material, and just generally understanding the state of Salvage as best as I can kind of explain it today with 323 just come out yesterday. And yeah, just discussing some of the topics around Salvage. So let's take a look. So first of all, as far as missions go, it's still going to be a priority to go after the cleanup missions, whether you go after the Connie or Cuddy cleanup mission or you go for the Hammerhead cleanup mission. So you see at the top here, there is verified or unverified. So you want to go to unverified. That's now the new personal listing. So that's where you're going to be able to find the cleanup missions that are going to be paying you to do salvage instead of charging you to do salvages. For now, there's no consequences for that, so I don't see it being a negative at all. So at this time, it's still going to be good to take those on and get started with those particular missions. I put these back in info set it, these couple clips here, but first of all, they have changed the reclaimer. The back part where you have this to the area to the salvage hole between the salvage processing, they actually have they've edited that. You can't actually, I don't think you can go down that lift, but the lift, at least they put some of the pieces back in there. Additionally, I do want to note that one of the big things you're going to find as a problem is you need to make sure that you're in SCM guns mode, because that is going to allow you to both use your mining mode. Now, it's going to be a bigger problem on the Reclaimer than it is the Vulture, but it's still relevant to both of them. You need to make sure you're in that mode in order to actually convert over to the Salvaging mode. So when you're on the Vulture, you need to just make sure you're over to SCM gun mode, and then you can go to mining mode. It'll be pretty obvious. But when you're on the Reclaimer, it will be less obvious, is you can't even get, and look at the power here. Let me finish this up. But essentially, you basically need to make sure you're in SCM gun mode, otherwise you can't even get your mining, you can't use the mining mode / salvage mode to even get the claw to go out. Additionally, you can't even scrape with it either. If you go to the area where the turrets are, you can't use the turrets either. So it really is quite a mess. You just can't use your ship appropriately if you are not in the SCM gun mode. So if you find that you can't get your claw to go out, or you can't actually collect material with scraping, or you can't get to your turret, sorry. When you get in your seat, you can't just go to the turret area. You have to go to SCM gun mode. So it's important to do that, at least for now. That's one of the big changes in 323. Additionally, you'll notice when I showed the arm piece there, you can't click the power. I had some problems with the power. So what I would do sometimes is shut the power off. And then I would shut the power. I would turn the power on first, and then I would try to send out the arm, and it would tell me, "Hey, power's not on." And so I had to then click on the power on button. So anyways, the arm piece was a little bit squirrely. So if you need to, try to send the arm out with M, and it'll say no power. Then look over to the left, it'll say power on. I did find sometimes it would just say power off. I probably could have held F and gotten the little scrolly wheel. It was being a little squirrely with me. So just pay attention to that. You might not see a power on button. Either hold down F and get it to show up, or try sending the arm out first, and then you can power it on. All right, so I think the next focus we have to have is on the RMC and construction material and how they sell and what the pricing is and things of that nature, at least somewhat estimated pricing. So I wanted to focus on the Vulture. That's why the tab at the bottom is called Vulture, because this is going to be the ship that's most adversely affected by the best going to be most affected by the recent changes. The Reclaimer will still be making plenty of money. Go out, either collect RMC or collect construction material, fill it your ship with as much of either as you'd like, and then go sell it. Like, you're going to make money. There's no real time focus on how much you can make. Sure, you can make more money one way or another. That's going to largely depend upon how big your crew is, how much you have to pay your crew, if at all. There's so many factors in that. And again, it's still largely a moneymaker regardless. You're really splitting hairs when it comes down to actually choosing, hey, should I focus on this or that? Whereas the Vulture, that's not really the case, because the Vulture is generally a one person crew. It's meant to be a one person crew, and there's not even anywhere else for anyone to sit. So unless they lay on the bed, but generally speaking, it's for one person, and it's meant for salvage. And you're fairly restricted on how many SCUs you can have in the Vulture. Obviously, the listed amount is 12. But you can get more than that in there. So I'm going off of the idea of 23 SCUs. You can get more, you can get less. Some people claim they get up to 25, something like that. I originally had 24 in here, but I think reliably getting 23 in there makes the most sense. So that's going to be 12 in the original stack, and then that's going to be 8 along the wall with an additional stack of 2 near the buffer, and then which leads us up to the 22, and then a third one or last one there going to be at the actual where the box just spits out. Now you could lift that box and have another one come out. You can fit one or two technically where the door is. I mean, you can really get pretty fancy with it, however you want to do that. But at the end of the day, let's focus on the 23, which is again the way I just kind of listed it. I'd like to visualize that, but it's just easier to kind of, there's so much content to cover. I don't want to waste anyone's time, so I'm trying to just get through it all. So what I have here is created a listing, and it's based off of the particular pricing that I have here at the top. I did notice quite a bit of variance in the pricing, especially with RMC, more so than the construction material, because the RMC is so expensive. The first thing I want to note is when, again, talking about the reclaimer, it's going to be nigh impossible as long as they continue to allow people to buy RMC at whatever location. There's a couple outposts that sell it. As long as they continue to allow people to buy RMC and then trade it, it's going to continue to hurt the salvage community. So it does, it hurts salvage gameplay. So it's unfortunate. They need to quit that until essentially the ability to use RMC for building or whatever it is that they ultimately want the recycled material to be used for would be nice, or raise the ceiling so that you can sell more, whatever it may be. But until trading can be done where you're not having to sell the RMC pieces by traders, so like C2s are filling their holes with it and then trading with it, and then it just maxes out Orison or other places. So you have to play around that essentially. Now, as a Vulture, it's not as big a deal because you can still generally sell. If you had 23 boxes, I was able to sell it pretty easily. So even though it showed that it had a high amount and it was not accepting anymore, I still was able to sell it. But again, if you have a reclaimer and you have like 400 boxes of RMC, then you're going to make a lot of money. But that's if you can sell it. And currently, there's a couple of cases where you just can't sell it. It's you have to wait around for it to be sold. So, anyways, looking back at the Vulture, what I have listed here is an inverse listing of the amount of RMC boxes that you have in your Vulture versus inverted listing of how many construction boxes you may have in there. So if you decide to just do what we used to do in the past, which is just frack a ship and then collect its materials, that would be 23 boxes of construction material. And therefore you're going to get zero in RMC, but you're going to get up to this amount, the 35,000 in construction material sales. Now I have listed and highlighted green, generally speaking, in these different columns just to kind of highlight where the maximum income is for these. And the goal is not necessarily to min max this, but to just get a scaling for you. And we're going to take a look at time as well. So obviously RMC sells for more. So you have 23 boxes of RMC, you're going to get considerably more money for it. That's just common sense. But that being said, there's also a time component with that because it takes more time. I was going to say significantly, but it does take more time, something that has to be measured. I did my best to set up a measurement for that, and we'll discuss that. So you could be off. I think it is off. And I think if you want this to be further refined, it needs more testing. And if we want that, please let me know in the comments. We can further refine it, and we can definitely take in community input, right? Like I'd like to see people saying, hey, it took me X amount of minutes to get, how many boxes of RMC. The challenge with that is these ships have different sizes and there's different levels of recycled material on these different ships. Like I don't recall, I'm trying to remember back. Like I spent about 40 minutes collecting RMC initially, and I could have swore I got a whole buffer, basically about 13, 12, anywhere between 10 to 13. I know there's a big variance in that, but anywhere between 10 to 13 RMC out of Andromeda. When I went out there to complete the Drake mission, I was able to complete it and scrape the whole thing, and I got less than 6 boxes. So it's going to largely depend upon what size the ship is that you're currently working and how much RMC and construction material you're going to get out of it. That's always going to be the case. Part of it too is going to be like depends on how messed up the ship is, because some have more salvage material than others. This patch doesn't appear to have a way to measure that. I thought at first that just meant that they weren't going to allow you to complete the mission that way, but that's not the case. It just appears to be that they no longer show you that stat, unfortunately. So that being said, assuming you can get 23 boxes of RMC, that's going to be the best way. Oh, look, here's the storm. That's going to be the best way to. Actually, I don't think you guys saw that because it was just my other tab. Sorry, I got distracted there. But I went too far down and I went over my BattleNet launcher and I saw here's the storm. But at any rate, yeah. So what's going to be going on here is that essentially you can get this 300 over well over a quarter million. It's almost a third. It's a third of a million out of just collecting 23 boxes of RMC, which sounds really good. But then again, you have to remember how many, you have to find a ship that can give you that many boxes, or that much. So a hammerhead can do that for you. You can go get the hammerhead mission, and you can just work on scraping it until you get 23 boxes. That's about all you're going to get out of it, because by the time you do all of that, it takes about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes. So that's where the time component comes into play. So what I've done is I've set a baseline at 8 minutes. That's more or less how much time it takes for you to get to the location. Um, you can frack the ship and then collect up the material and then go to process it. It's somewhere between like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. Like it's somewhere, it's over 5 minutes probably, but I would think less than 10. It'll largely depend upon where you start from. I was using Orison as a starting point there. I only timed it a few times. It's going to depend on server lag. It's going to depend on your jump drive. It's going to depend on quite a few things. Obviously, if you're already out there, it will take less time for you to go from one part of the salvage mission. If you're able to get it in multiple times in a row, it's going to be less time for you to get there. So this is, but it's the starting point, right? So I've set 8 minutes as the starting point. So, if you want to get the construction material, it takes about 8 minutes for you to get that construction material and process it. And there you go. You've spent 8 minutes. And so, money per minute is dividing up this 8 minutes into the 35K. So you've made about, 4K a minute. So you can kind of spread that out, and you can kind of determine that at that point. When I was doing the Hammerhead mission, it took about 45 minutes. I'd say that's too high. It's probably closer to maybe 40, maybe 35 to 40. But I'm going to keep the 45 minutes in here. And the reason is I was trying to complete the mission to get the money out of it. Because when you scrape the hammerhead, you can technically complete that mission and go ahead and get the money out of it, as well as get the scraping materials. But I don't know. It seems like if you're really scraping it down, it takes quite a few minutes. So it just gives us a point of reference, right? So what I've set is 1.61 minutes per SCM and then processing it. So that's more or less the amount of time. Again, this needs further refinement. So if you want me to spend more time doing that, I would I'd need a fair amount of folks to request that. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep using the reclaimer. It's just easier to make money that way, right? It's not like a flex or anything. It's just the idea that it takes time to set up all this, right? And to do it. And if you can just make more money, well, when you want to do it, right? Like, I like taking the Vulture out. So sometimes I just do that for fun. But at the end of the day, it is trying to make money most efficiently as possible. And the Reclaimer is going to do that leaps and bounds over the Vulture. It's just the way it is. At any rate, here I've set a minute and 61 seconds, which is also another minute. I never really noticed that before. I guess this is a little over a minute and a half. This isn't meant to be. It's meant to be a minute and a half, essentially, a little over a minute and a half, for you to go ahead and do the processing here. And so it's in a decimal, but it's not in a decimal way of time, specifically speaking. But anyways, so a minute and a half for you to get an RMC, a little over that, to get one SCU of RMC, and then again, kind of taking into effect the processing time. Obviously, it's going to take you longer than a minute and a half if you scrape for an RMC, one SCU of RMC, the recycled material. If you scrape for that and then go process the box each time, it's probably going to take you over a minute and a half. But if you average that out and you fill up the buffer with 13 SCUs, it's you get to save a little bit of time because you're just down there processing for a few minutes and you're scraping for a few minutes. So at the end of the day, if you start to break that down, I've done it here for one mission. So if you're just spending the time, straight time, versus the baseline 8 minutes, and you're extrapolating this all the way down to the 45 minutes, then you can see here that that's obviously going to be better money overall. The longer you take, and it was good to see this. Like, this is just good data here. Because there is, it depends on how you look at it. Because in some ways, there's it is better money at the end of the day, but you can kind of see, hey, if I want to play for 30 minutes, where can I look on the scale here? Okay, well, I should probably get about 14 SCUs of recycled material if possible. Again, this is assuming the target that you're working with. This is why I put kind of one mission. This is assuming the target you're working with has this many SCUs on it before you have to go to another mission. So you can see here that this is where, in 30 minutes, you can expect to make a 7,000 AUEC over that time period. And so the reason I put this mix in here is because you don't want to just fill your RMC here, or your structure material. You want to fill a gap. So the best way to do that is to do a mix of the two. So you want to take the RMC, so you got the 14 SUs of RMC. Well, you want to fill the rest of that 23 that you have available with 9 SUs of construction material, if you can. Again, this goes back to the hammerhead. You can't break down a hammerhead or an A2 or other ships like that, so you can't fill the gaps. So with those large ships, you just want to scrape them down, and you want to get the full 23 out of that. Now, if it's a smaller ship like a Connie or a Cuddy, you want to get as much RMC out of it as you can, and then technically you want to fill up the SCUs with the construction material and go sell that. That's going to be probably the best way to go about your time, unless you can move on to another ship. Let's say you're in the wake of a disaster or something of that nature. If you have more ships to choose from, then getting as much RMC as possible is going to be the best option, and then you're backfilling it with the construction material. So this is really what that looks like. We're going to take a look at a graphic of that. But all in all, I tried to play with the numbers with doing a second mission. I just couldn't. I don't know. I'd almost hide this. I think it's hard to determine. I kind of tried to set up, hey, well, every 6 SUs or so, then add 5 minutes or something, but I'm just going to hide this. I think it doesn't add a lot. It's, again, that needs more testing. Oh, there's a graph over here we're going to look at for a second. But okay, also total salvage here. So this is a salvage claim. This is just going to show you if you're going to spend, I found the 50K mission to be the most expensive, but it's also going to be the largest ship possible. So it goes back to the mix again. So if you just use construction material on something like the 23 boxes of it on a salvage claim, you're going to be losing money. So that's just an interesting way to look at it. You're making only this amount of money potentially out of it. So if you don't scrape it at all and you just break it down, you're losing money. It's just the way it is. And that 50K mission, it seems like these days it's just like a constellation or something. It doesn't appear to even be like the large C2 or anything like that, or A2. It appears to be a smaller. They're still listed as large, but it's just not that large enough to actually justify it. So down here, this is again assuming you can get 13 boxes. I kind of ended it here because I don't think you're going to get more than 13. Honestly, you'll probably be lucky to get like 10. So if you're actually paying for a salvage claim, more than likely you're going to need to scrape it and then break it down to a construction material, and that's what this is. It's just a look at the mix here. Yeah, and then a subtraction and on what you're being paid. You're paying for the salvage claim. So that's a look at the total claim, and that's where, again, going back to prioritize the mission of the cleanups is going to be the better option. I think they need to lower the prices of these claims in order to make them usable. If they get rid of the paying missions, the cleanup missions, same thing with the or start putting more boxes. So I guess the caveat on this, a little asterisk goes along with this, is that this is not including any bonuses. So those bonuses could be, those other ships could have like scrap them or something, right? Like there could be, I think one time I used to find like weave legs or something. It's very rare. I don't know if they even do that anymore. That's something like way back in 320 or something like that. So anyways, these do have an option to make some money off of boxes of SCU of things that are in there. But again, you basically would have to show up, pull those boxes out first, take those back, sell them, and then come back out again, and then do your processing. It'd almost be better even to show up with like an A class, a whole A or something, and do that first. Figure out what boxes are there, fly back, sell that stuff, and then come back out with your Vulture or something like that. Anyways, it becomes a little more logistically challenging to kind of calculate that pricing. This isn't really based off time. This is just strictly off of, hey, you've spent 50K on it, you've got all day to do it. Just how much you potentially can you make. So anyways, this just shows it's just much better to go along with the other missions, so you can make significantly more money. Obviously, again, if you can get the full RMC of 23 boxes, and this doesn't even include the fact that if you were to complete the Hammerhead mission, you would get the 30K on top of it as well. So I do have a video. I'll probably put it in here if I have time, where I didn't complete it in time, and so boom, just it looked like the alien popping out of the dude in Alien, because the ships just spawned right on the hammerhead that I had, and I was like, all right, I guess it's time to go then. So you can technically do it. You can technically scrape it down and get the 30K out of it. But even if you just do the Andromeda and the other cleanup missions, you can still get the 20K out of it, or maybe do it a couple times. Again, I was trying to calculate a second mission timer in here, where you start adding in some extra time, but it's almost impossible to try to determine how many extra minutes you're going to have. Again, it would need more testing. So this is the graphic that I've kind of put up. It's a really quick, basic one, but this just kind of shows the relationship. This is the inverse relationship, where you can see that the construction material has just been nerfed heavily, at least for the Vulture's purposes, because this just indicates you're limited on the amount of construction material you can actually have. And so what this is looking at here is the amount of RMC, how much money you can make of it, and the more SCMs you have of it. And then this yellow, the mix here actually shows how important it is when you have fewer boxes of RMC to actually make up that difference with the construction material. So it's going to look like a duck's beak with that construction material, but as you use RMC to fill that gap, you can see here it's less relevant when you get up to here, because obviously they touch here because this is zero construction material, but you can see they're really close here. So if you had like 20 boxes of RMC or something like that, you can count these little slashes down here. I could not get the count of SCUs to show up on this for whatever reason. At any rate, this is my first time graphing, which I use Excel quite a bit, but this is my first time using Google Sheets to do it. At any rate, when you get to about this amount, what is this, like 15 or so? That's more than that, 6 away or so. It becomes less relevant, right? So you've got this little gap going on here. Yeah, you'll make more money, but it may not be worth your time even at that point to break it down and get. If you're scraping that long and you've got that many boxes, even an arm keep, it can almost be made for what that 13. What 13's got to be around here somewhere. It's about the midpoint here. And so even then, filling this gap with doing the construction material, if you're scraping the holes, which is the best way to make money, it looks like at this point, just get the 13 and then fill it up and move on. Yeah. Again, that's pretty much it. That's what I wanted to really focus on. I think for the purpose of this video, that's just it's not quick. It took longer. I always end up having these videos kind of take a little longer than I'd like, but that's a look at pricing for the salvaging at this point. I may make a longer video, but I do plan on making a Vulture guide as well, where I'll kind of go over more keybinds and how to do them, and also taking a look at some of those, a little deeper dive in those missions. But yeah, that's a quick look at it. Thank you all for taking the time to watch it. Please, if you like content like this, like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you find this stuff useful. If you want me to continue to evaluate it a little bit more, maybe the timing's off, right? Like maybe this could be quicker. Maybe this is too nice. Maybe I like gave scraping too much credit here. Maybe it actually takes longer. I also need to do more testing to figure out how long it actually takes to scrape, or how much material I can actually get out of certain ships. I actually, it'd be really nice if SCIG would list that. Like, hey, this is how many SCs you can get of recycled material from this particular ship. Obviously, that's something that can be tested a bit more. But yeah, this is where the Vulture kind of money meets the road. It's scraping. It looks like it's going to take more of a priority. Again, the only challenge with that I see is that sometimes it can be hard to sell those boxes. Luckily for the Vulture, it seems to be fewer boxes. So if you are having trouble selling it, just wait a little bit, a few minutes, and you should be able to sell it then at that particular TDD. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.